Tonight on Talking Points, Judge Roy Moore continues to face blowback for allegations over his sexual misconduct.
I did. I think he should step aside.
The GOP is responding in a number of ways, with some continuing to support Moore's campaign and others asking that he step down.
In other election news, the Democrats continue to celebrate last Tuesday's victories.
We'll look into what it means for Dems and the GOP in the future.
And the GOP moves ahead with two plans for tax reform. Here's what Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin had to say about the plan.
By far the majority, both the House and Senate version provide middle-income tax relief.
Closer to home, Syracuse has itself a new mayor. We'll explore what that means for the city later in the show.
And the fight between Saudi Arabia and Iran continues. A sudden resignation from the Lebanese prime minister is increasing tensions in the region.
We'll have all that and more ahead.
This is Talking Points. We begin tonight with the ongoing news about Alabama Senate nominee Roy Moore and his alleged sexual misconduct with teenage girls. I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is now calling for Republican Senate nominee Roy Moore to step aside from the race. McConnell says he believes the woman accusing Moore of sexual misconduct. He joins John McCain and Mitt Romney as Republicans continue to speak out against the Senate hopeful from Alabama. Judge Roy Moore responded by saying that Senator McConnell should step aside, adding that he has failed conservatives and must be replaced.
Moore says he plans to sue the Washington Post for his reporting on the matter. The Post alleges he made sexual advances on teenagers, one being a 14-year-old when Moore was in his 30s. Moore says the Post's allegations are evidence that it's desperate to stop his political campaign. The special election date for Alabama's senator is scheduled for December 12th, and Judge Moore plans to continue to run in the race. Take a listen to what Alabama Governor Kay Ivey had to say about her plans for voting.
Based on what I know now, yes, I will vote for him, but we don't have the facts. There may be some more facts to come out, but he is the party's nominee.
Well, we're now joined by Talking Points contributor Dan Prager to talk further about the Washington Post revelations dogging Judge Moore and his campaign. Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm just going to simply ask you, if Roy Moore does what he says and continues to run in this race, with these allegations, now we may not know the truth until after the election as the legal process works itself out, but do you think with all of these allegations he could still win?
I think he could. I don't know if he will or won't. It's really close right now. Recent polls have shown Doug Jones up, but a lot of Republicans, it's still close. Common wisdom, you would think that this would really hurt Moore's campaign, but a lot of people with the political climate are sticking with him, and it's really surprising.
Going beyond his campaign, though, is this ultimately hindering the GOP messaging within the race, or maybe not even the messaging, but the branding in broad scope, being the fact that some are willing to defend a man accused of this?
I don't think it is. I mean, again, you would think that something like that would greatly harm a political party, especially the party that is going and saying that transgender bathrooms would hurt their daughters. Now, but really, it comes to the ends justify the means. And it seems like the arguments for Judge Moore are that even if what he says is true, we don't know all the facts yet. If what he says is true, and from what Moore has said, especially on Sean Hannity, where he said, I wouldn't date any of these girls without their mom's permission, it kind of sounds like even if these non-consensual allegations were false, he was dating teenagers. And it seems like they're saying this Republican who does things we don't like would still be better than a Democrat, so we're still going to vote for him anyway.
And Dan, like you said, you know, we don't know all of the facts, but with this much stacked up against him, it obviously doesn't look good. And I'm wondering if this is going to be one of those cases where initially, you know, everybody, both sides of the aisle sort of come out and say that he should step aside, what he did was wrong. But I have this inkling that, you know, after a few weeks, and if this just sort of passes, and you know, obviously the opposition is never going to give up on this fight. But if Roy Moore sticks it out, I have a feeling in a month, people are going to sort of move beyond it and still vote for him. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think it could easily happen. A lot of the people that are coming out against him, McConnell, the Republican Party, they're all elites. And the Alabama Republican Party really hasn't. The chair of the Alabama Party today, she said that if any Alabama Republicans come out against him, if they support Doug Jones or a Luther Strange write-in campaign, that there would basically be hell to pay.
Actually, Luther Strange cannot appear on the ballot. Alabama has a sore loser rule, whereas you can only go on once. So Luther Strange out of the question. We'll have to see if he's replaced with somebody else. But Dan, thanks so much for being here.
For having me.
After the break, we'll recap Thursday's elections where Democrats enjoyed victories all across the country. We have more on what that means for the party's future. Don't go away.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
You've messed up your son's haircut.
Mom?
Do you A, try to fix it?
Like it never happened.
B, work with what you got? Or C, show solidarity?
Thank you, baby.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Come on, it's not that hard.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
Democrats are celebrating election victories across the country following last Tuesday's elections. The party won governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey and were also victorious in unlikely places such as New Hampshire. It's the first major election day since Trump's win last November. We have Talking Points contributors Thomas St. Hilaire and Jack Watson here to tell us what these victories mean for Democrats and the GOP moving forward. Guys, thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
Thomas, first to you, what does this mean, and more specifically, what does this mean for the Democratic Party?
I mean, broadly speaking, you don't have to do too much backbending to see the significance of this. When you see this type of consistency across the country for one party, it's really not hard to see why this is impactful towards the general political climate. For Democrats specifically, I mean, they really learned two things. First off is that antipathy towards Donald Trump was effective. Ultimately, and not just to his policies, but to the very core of Trumpism itself. And it really motivated voters to come out. And the other factor that you're kind of seeing is this creates questions and both optimism for the Democrats, which is, you know, was 2016 really a broad reflection of the country's views on policy, or was it a little bit more of an outlier? Now, I don't know the answer to that question. We'll have to really wait till 2018 and 2020 to see that. But it does kind of create a little bit of momentum, you know, maybe suggesting that Trump could have hit a peak and maybe this 37% approval rating will hurt him in the long run.
Now, Jack, when you look at 2018, and if you're sort of removing 2016, 2017 out of the picture, you just look at it objectively, the Senate races in 2018 really looked beneficial to Republicans. But after these big Democratic wins this past week, do you think Republicans should be worried about next year's elections?
Mike, there's a few things that you need to take into account when you look at these Virginia and New Jersey wins, and that's the individual states and the issues there. For example, in New Jersey, the incumbent governor, Republican Chris Christie, his approval rating was 14% going into the election. You know, and his lieutenant governor, Kim Guadagno, was the Republican nominee. So this can stem, you can look at this through a lot of different perspectives, but what it comes down to is that in New Jersey, there were a lot of different issues besides Trumpism, and that's something that you need to take into account when you think about this. Now, in terms of the 2018 elections, now all of the House of Representatives is fair game, 33 states for the U.S. Senate also fair game. The Republicans can only lose 3 seats If they lose 3 seats, then their majority is gone. So, I mean, I would have to agree with Thomas when he says that this is a huge development for the Democrats, because it shows that a majority of Democrats in a state can come out and support their own party. And that's why I don't think it would be far-fetched to see the Democrats take back the Senate.
Even though the GOP won the 4 House seats up for re-election and they suffered tremendous losses, do you think that not only are the Democrats going to dig into what worked, but do you expect the GOP to change their strategy moving forward?
I mean, I'll start off by saying this. I think the Republicans are far more likely to change their strategy considering this. I mean, you saw in the elections in deep red states, Trumpism was more effective than you saw in these purple states like Virginia, like New Jersey. I mean, Virginia and New Jersey were states that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. So heavily tying yourself to Trump in states that he lost really doesn't make that much sense. I think Democrats are going to kind of stick with what they did in many of these elections, which was really showing that opposition towards Trump.
And I think that that is a critical component of this race, is what are we going to look at moving forward? And that's certainly something that we're going to have to pay attention to, both of you. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you very much.
Great to be here.
The GOP is currently pushing 2 tax bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, that if passed could mean a major overhaul of the tax code. The House bill is expected to come up for a vote soon, after it passed the Ways and Means Committee last Thursday. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin spoke about the plans on CNN's State of the Union Sunday.
It's so complicated that literally everybody may take advantage of a different piece. And we want to make this thing simple and fair and provide middle-income tax relief. And I'm comfortable we'll end up doing that.
We have Talking Points contributor Byron Tollefson in studio to break down the plan. Byron?
One of President Trump's big campaign promises was cutting the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%. The House tax bill had cut it down to 20%. But now the Senate version released Thursday delays cutting the corporate rate. The change wouldn't happen until 2019. However, the Senate plan also gets rid of state and local tax deductions, and those living in high-tax states would suffer as a result. With the deduction gone, taxpayers won't be able to deduct state property from their federal taxes, and 44 million people use that break. The plan also creates 7 income brackets instead of 4. The bottom tax rate goes from 12% to 10%. Now, both bills would add to the deficit. The Senate plan would add $1.5 trillion over the next decade, and that has bothered Senators Jeff Flake and Bob Corker. Corker said he would not vote for any bill that adds a single cent to the deficit. And as the House bill hasn't been voted on just yet, there's plenty of time for the Senate version to change. But the stakes are clearly high for Republicans, as Lindsey Graham said last month that if the tax reform does not get passed, it will be the end of the Republican Party as we know it.
Now, Byron, like you said, next week the House plan could come up for a vote. Now, you know, not like the Senate. In the House, they do have somewhat of a cushion for their majority. You know, there are some worries from New York and New Jersey members about the state and local tax deductions. You know, do you think it has a good shot of passing?
So right now, Republican leaders are expecting 225 to 230 votes on the House bill, and they only need 218 to pass. And it's interesting you bring up New York, because a New York Republican, Peter King, has come out against the bill in the House. However, he says he hasn't heard from GOP leadership in weeks. They haven't even talked to him. That should show how confident they are about getting this passed.
But what's the main difference between this process and ultimately the Obamacare repeal?
Well, it's the end of the year now. They've gone through Obamacare, and this is their last chance to have a big legislative accomplishment in this Trump agenda, because if they don't get this, they have nothing to show for them after a year in office. But one other difference that you've seen is that in the Senate, you haven't seen any Republicans come out and say, I'm not voting for this just yet. You have some Republicans like Bob Corker and Jeff Flake saying, oh, I don't like this part, but they haven't said, I'm not voting for it yet. So I think there's a lot of political realities they're facing about getting this bill passed to have a major achievement.
Well, even if they pass the bill, you know, there's some key differences in the Senate bill, and the Senate has the reconciliation rules, which means they can only spend so much. So this is definitely something to watch, whether they can, you know, fix this out between the two of them. So Byron, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Up next, the Lebanese Prime Minister's sudden resignation is raising questions about an ongoing proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We'll have more on that when we get back.
Superheroes? Just 4 brothers who hate bullies and love this city.
We're gonna go out there in the rain. It's gonna get wet. All right, here we go. Oh, okay, quick. Oh yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. We're getting so wet. Oh,
In last week's mayoral election, independent candidate Ben Walsh made history, beating out Juanita Perez-Williams to become the first non-party affiliate mayor of Syracuse. Take a listen to what he had to say during the mayoral debates.
The reality is we have about 93% of the police force is white. Yet, half of the city is non-white. That's a big problem.
Talking Points contributor Sabrina Maggiore is here to tell us what his tenure as mayor could bring to the city. Sabrina?
Thanks, Josh. So Ben Walsh campaigned as an independent candidate, promoting the rise above party politics and to work across party lines. The mayor-elect focused in on 3 platform pillars, the first of which was addressing safety concerns within the Syracuse community. He hopes to do this in part by increasing the amount of officers in the city and ensuring that officers reflect the racial makeup of residents. In addition to addressing this, Walsh plans on bolstering safety and increasing the number of security cameras in the city. Another priority for Walsh is improving academic achievement in schools. To accomplish this, Walsh plans on investing in career and technical education and involving the community when developing curriculum. Walsh's final pillar is tackling poverty within the city. He plans on bringing living wage manufacturing jobs to Syracuse and hopes to incentivize home ownership. Walsh will also have to address several problems during his time as mayor. In his first budget, Walsh will have to fill a $3.4 billion gap in revenue. Destiny USA dished over the $3.4 billion as part of the property deal. However, these payments end this year. While Walsh has advocated for the community grid option, regardless of the DOT's decision regarding I-81, Walsh will have to mitigate construction efforts and deal with the disruptions posed to residents. Lastly, Walsh will certainly have to mend relations with Governor Cuomo and County Executive Joni Mahoney. Mayor Minor's tenure was mired by feuds between the two, and Walsh's victory seems to signal that voters are tired of those partisan divisions.
Thanks, Sabrina. Tensions are rising in the Middle East after the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad Hariri, resigned from his post in Saudi Arabia last week. It's the latest move in what many regional analysts are calling a Cold War between the region's 2 main powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Talking Points contributor Elijah Shama is here to break down these developments. Elijah, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Elijah, why would the Lebanese Prime Minister resign in the Saudi capital?
It's really interesting because the Lebanese Prime Minister is actually a Saudi Arabian citizen. He has 2 passports, and kind of his resignation in Riyadh is a very clear signal that kind of Saudi Arabia has its pockets in a lot of these countries that we don't necessarily think about. And by kind of the Lebanese Prime Minister resigning, they're showing that he kind of forgot the hand that fed him, and now he's been recalled, so to speak.
So now that Saudi Arabia is ultimately losing a proxy fight with Iran in Yemen, and now they're angling towards what seems like Lebanon, what is the nation's play in all of this?
It's really interesting because it's just that. They're losing the war in Yemen. Syria, they were not able to kind of exert that influence that you'd think. Iran and Hezbollah kind of swept into that war and very much turned the tide in it. And then when you look at Lebanon, they haven't been able to kick Hezbollah out of Lebanon for a large part of the time, so it's kind of strange to think why they'd be able to do it now. And by getting rid of Saad Hariri, who was in a way their client, it kind of seems like they shot themselves in the foot without knowing what came next.
Now, Salman's efforts so far haven't really been successful. What sort of changes should we be expecting?
It's interesting because he seems to kind of double down. When we look at the war in Yemen, that's kind of not gone well for the Saudi government. When we look at Syria, they poured billions of dollars in. They didn't get the results they want. When we look at Lebanon, Saad Hariri wasn't able to kind of give those results they wanted either. So it's interesting because they've kind of thrown money at a lot of these problems and nothing's stuck. But he's been able to double down on a lot of these issues. The war in Yemen, increased bombing, kind of the Syrian civil war, increased support for whatever rebels they were supporting. And then in Lebanon, more support for kind of Saudi foreign investment, and then pressuring the Lebanese government economically by pulling out that foreign investment and telling the residents to come back.
So what would Iran want in all of this if this is multiple conflicts going on throughout the region with the same power?
Iran is looking to kind of extend its sphere of influence as far as they can push it. And it seems that Saudi Arabia has either been unwilling or unable to counteract that influence. So Iran's going to try to keep pushing as far as they can take it. And right now, that's made it all the way to Syria. And that's a little too close to comfort for Saudi Arabia.
Now, Elijah, real quick, is there some sort of grand strategy on part of Saudi Arabia?
It's interesting because when you look at this, you can think it's a grand strategy, but really there's three people calling the shots, and people often have reasons for doing things, and those aren't necessarily clear right now. But if it is part of a grand strategy, it's very unclear what that strategy is at the moment.
Elijah, coming in to help us at the very last minute, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate coming.
Coming up, we have the stories you may have missed this past week. An SU alumnus is under arrest in Saudi Arabia as the country continues to crack down on corruption.
And a Saudi-led coalition responds to international criticism for its actions against Yemeni rebels. Stay tuned.
Fancy pants peanut butter? A big screen television? You haven't even bought a sofa yet. A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers. Feed the pig.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent. We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness. I am a witness. I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
Some stories don't receive the mainstream attention they deserve. This week on Talking Points, we look at an SU alumnus involved in the Saudi Arabian corruption crackdown and the resignation of the Lebanese Prime Minister. Over 200 people are detained in Saudi Arabia following the nation's attempt to crack down on corruption. One of those is Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, the richest man in the Middle East with a net worth of over $15 billion. Al-Walid is not only a member of the Saudi Arabian royal family, but a Syracuse University alumnus. Al-Walid received a master's degree in political science from SU in 1985. Al-Walid currently serves as a member of the advisory board of the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs.
It is unknown at this time what authorities are charging Al-Walid with. Following the arrest, his net worth dropped $1.2 billion, according to Forbes. His arrest could have implications for the many American companies he invests in. The prince owns 95% of the company Kingdom Holding, which owns large stakes in companies like Twitter, Citigroup, and more. Time will tell what economic implications the arrests of himself and others will have.
Saudi Arabia announced today that Saudi coalition fighters will reopen air and seaports in Yemen. The Saudi-led group closed Yemeni airports and seaports following a Houthi rebel missile attack on Riyadh. The initial closures prevented humanitarian relief efforts to reach Yemen, one of the poorest nations in the Middle East. The move drew criticism from the UN, EU, and other groups. One EU official says the delivery of supplies is critical to the Yemeni population. deliveries rendered impossible by the blockade.
The Saudi mission at the UN has asked the organization to send teams to airports in rebel-controlled territory. They hope these efforts will help to prevent weapons in spite of the announcement. Rebel leaders say they will retaliate with greater ferocity following the blockade. Rebel leader Saleh el-Samid said in a rally that the Saudi coalition shut down all doors for peace and dialogue, and that the Houthis will continue to find ways to assault the enemy. After a short break, Mike and I will take a look at the stories you should be following in the weeks ahead. Stick.
Maybe he's really focused.
Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. This is a serious problem, but one we can solve. Visit feedingamerica.org to help. Together we can solve hunger. Together we're feeding America.
When they test you, stand firm and move only when you hear the seatbelt click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
Tonight I'm looking ahead to the potential fallout from an explosive piece that broke today in The Atlantic. The piece alleges that secret correspondence occurred between Donald Trump Jr. and WikiLeaks during the campaign. The writer says that WikiLeaks asked the president's son for his cooperation in private direct messages. She goes on to say that WikiLeaks would repeatedly ask Trump Jr. to push stories or help them further hurt the Clinton campaign. They even said that if Trump lost, they would help him claim that the election was rigged. They allegedly stayed in contact from early 2016 to July of this year. Their last message was to help Trump Jr. deal with his role in the Russian probe. These messages were handed over to congressional investigators. I'll be looking ahead to what this means for the ongoing investigation into President Trump and Russia.
The National Security Agency's cybersecurity infrastructure has been catastrophically breached. According to an exclusive report from the New York Times, a group called the Shadow Brokers has exposed many of the hacking tools that the NSA uses to spy on other countries with. The serial leaking of the United States cyber weapons has significantly hindered U.S. reputation and compromised the agency's resources. The disclosures by the Shadow Brokers group began in August of 2016, according to the New York Times report. The breach might harken back to the consistent exposures by Edward Snowden to journalists. However, Snowden just released code words, while the Shadow Brokers have released the actual unique code. These hacking attacks have shook the cyber security community and its agency to its core. I'll be looking ahead to how the NSA addresses the concerns exposed by these hacks and how the intelligence community at large responds.
Really quick, going back to the Atlantic story, obviously Special Counsel Robert Mueller is going to be all over this, and this could just provide the missing link between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks and the WikiLeaks with Russia.
There's absolutely no doubt that this is a bombshell revelation, and the fact that there is not collusion between the Russian government and the Trump administration just yet, but collusion with other sources attempting to kind of plot this out beyond the election. So with Trump Jr. having direct ties and the correspondence lasting as long as it did, it's certainly a troubling revelation.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we have for tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for clips and full-length episodes.
I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney.
Good night.